Welcome to the First Peoples Cultural Council's informational video on the Heritage Stewardship Grant, pre-recorded February 20th, 2024. This presentation provides an overview of the Heritage Stewardship Grant Program, including what the grant is, project examples, who can apply, eligible costs, application requirements, the grant program timeline, and how to apply. So what is the Heritage Stewardship Grant? The FPCC Heritage Program is pleased to launch the third cycle of the Heritage Stewardship Program, or HSP. The HSP combines existing and new grants into 4 priority areas, including sense of place, climate change, oral histories and protocols, and digitization and archiving. The purpose of combining these grant streams is to reduce the administrative burden on applicants while increasing the funding flexibility to better meet applicants' needs. This program makes it possible for an organization to apply for up to 3 priority areas in one application. For each priority area, applicants can apply for between $10,000 and $25,000. Applicants may choose up to 3 priority areas in a single application for a maximum funding request of $75,000. Budgets must be provided for each priority area. Priority Area 1 is Sense of Place. This priority area supports BC First Nations communities and organizations to safeguard sensitive and significant cultural landscapes, places, and sites. Projects should include a mentorship or training component through which youth learn Indigenous and contemporary approaches to managing culture and heritage that are connected to the land. Funding available for projects in this priority area is $10,000 to $25,000. Some project examples from this priority area include land-based documenting projects, projects connecting Indigenous knowledge systems, the land and waters, knowledge-sharing projects that are connected to a specific place, research projects to understand and caretake a site or place, place name projects, and mentorship and training projects related to cultural landscapes and activities. Priority Area 2 is Climate Change. This priority area supports BC First Nations communities and organizations to explore how their communities are experiencing and responding to climate change in the context of Indigenous cultural heritage protection and revitalization. Projects may include the development of mitigation measures for heritage sites and places that are impacted by climate change. Funding available for projects in this priority area is $10,000 to $25,000. Some project examples from this priority area include documenting the impact of climate change on local fisheries and other food sources, assessing the impacts of climate change on culturally significant places and historic sites, developing beach management strategies to mitigate coastal erosion, and documenting and disseminating information about communities and landscapes that are experiencing climate change impacts. Priority Area 3 is Oral Histories and Protocols. This priority area supports BC First Nations communities and organizations to engage elders and knowledge keepers in sharing their stories and contributing to documenting Indigenous laws, protocols, and ways of knowing. Funding available for projects in this priority area is $10,000 to $25,000. Some project examples from this priority area include audio or video recording interviews of elders and knowledge keepers, translating and transcribing oral history recordings, research projects or focus groups to document and articulate Indigenous laws, protocols, and knowledge systems. Access to an online course is provided for recording oral histories. This course includes modules on preparing for an oral history interview, conducting oral history interviews, data management and transcription, and technology recommendations. Priority Area 4 is digitization and archiving. This priority area supports BC First Nations communities and organizations to digitize and/or archive existing cultural heritage records. This may include maps, audio and video recordings, transcripts, photos, illustrations, books, and other culturally important materials. Funding available for projects in this priority area is $10,000 to $25,000. Some project examples from this priority area include creating an inventory of cultural heritage materials to digitize, transferring audio and video cassettes to digital media, training within communities on digitizing and archiving, cataloging cultural heritage records for an organization, and documenting and sharing heritage through new technologies. Who can apply for a Heritage Stewardship Grant? Eligible applicants include recognized First Nations governments, bands, or tribal councils located in BC, not-for-profit societies registered in BC in good standing and governed by BC First Nations individuals, where at least 75% of directors identify as members of recognized BC First Nations. Urban and off-reserve BC First Nations organizations, where at least 75% of directors identify as members of recognized BC First Nations. BC First Nations-led museums and cultural spaces, where at least 75% of directors identify as members of recognized BC First Nations. And First Nation schools and adult education centers operating in BC on First Nations lands. Please note that applications from First Nation schools that serve one community must be submitted through their respective nation or band office. FPCC is unable to fund K-12 classroom activities or post-secondary accredited courses or tuition. Please also note that all new nonprofit societies and organizations must provide FPCC with their certificate of registration, proof of insurance, proof that at least 75% of directors identify as First Nations, and their banking information in order to receive funding. This information will help us better understand your organization, its mandate, and how it operates, so that we can support you through the funding process. If requested by FPCC staff, this information must be provided before a funding agreement can be issued. FPCC is committed to accountability and transparency in the delivery of funding. If you would like to apply for a Heritage Stewardship Program grant and you're unsure about your eligibility, please reach out to us. What costs are covered? Project costs must be directly applied to and be essential to the project. Costs will be reviewed to determine if they are reasonable and have been accurately estimated. Eligible project costs may include salaries and wages. These must be specific to the project. Honoraria. from $100 to $250 per half-day, and from $300 to $500 per full day, depending on the activities and protocols. Rates above these amounts must be covered by the applicant organization. Contractors and consultants may be hired if a project requires special skills. These costs may not exceed 30% of the funding requested. Funding recipients must show that they have made best efforts to hire an Indigenous contractor or provide justification for why a non-Indigenous contractor was hired. Indigenous contractors and consultants will be prioritized. A written quote must be provided with the grant application for contractor costs budgeted over $1,000. Equipment rentals and purchases, including computers and recording devices. These costs can be up to 20% of the requested budget for sense of place, climate change, and oral histories and protocols grants, and up to 80% for digitization and archiving grants. Administration costs, up to 15% of the funding requested. Software needed to achieve the project's objectives. Meeting and event space rentals. Materials and supplies. Food and hospitality costs that are reasonable and necessary, and travel costs that are reasonable and necessary. Next, we want to briefly mention a few things that will help you succeed in developing your project proposal. These are things that will also help the Grant Proposal Review Committee to evaluate your grant application. Applications cannot be reviewed unless all necessary information is provided. Applicants must submit completed applications that include the following: a balanced project budget with detailed descriptions and cost breakdowns for each category, a thorough work plan with dates for key activities, a project timeline that fits within the HSP funding term, 2 letters of support, one demonstrating governance approval from within the organization, and the second indicating support from the community. All letters of support must be dated and signed. For letters demonstrating governance approval, for bands, this would look like a dated and signed Band Council resolution or a letter of approval dated and signed by a BC First Nation chief, band manager, or a member of council. For societies and organizations, this would look like a dated and signed letter of approval from the executive director or general manager. For letters demonstrating community support, the letter can be from a project participant, someone who will not receive financial benefit from the project, a collaborating community or organization, or from a person of high standing in the community. It should not be from the chief, a member of council, the band manager, or a signing authority of the applicant organization, as they will be indicating their support through the letter of governance approval. Finally, applications must include proof of additional confirmed funding, if applicable. Examples of this proof include funding agreements and letters from donors or sponsors. What is the grant program timeline? The application deadline is March 22nd, 2024, and applicants will be notified by May 10th. Project activities are to begin on or after May 27th, 2024. An interim report will be due by January 10th, 2025. Projects are to be completed by August 29th, 2025, and a final report is also due August 29th, 2025. How can my organization apply? Remember, the Heritage Stewardship Program requires only one application for projects that involve up to 3 of the 4 priority areas. Applications are now open on FPCC's grant portal, which can be accessed at fpcc.smartsimple.ca. You will need to create an account to apply. Please reach out to Paulina at hsp@fpcc.ca or call her at 250-532-2672 if you need any support while preparing your application. This concludes the informational video for the Heritage Stewardship Grant. Thank you for joining us.